Everyone. Hey everyone, we're back and I'm so excited to hear the next part of Lalainia's story. We used to live in the same complex, so we were together a lot, and we went to the same church. Now it's a sister church and we live in different places, so I actually don't know what's been going on. So this is exciting for me too, just to hear what's been happening with Lalainia. So I'm just wondering, how does it present itself now, or were you fully recovered and all better? And yeah, I would like to hear the next steps.
Definitely not all better. I feel very, very lucky that I was able to move on from my eating disorder. Yep. Because it's not common. However, I'm a very strong believer that if you're not very diligent in being aware of what's going on with you internally as well, you can lose touch again. And definitely that's what happened with me. I recovered, but I never really dealt with a lot of the main issues for really how negative my inner thinking was, and how I would reach a point where it was like I would have no clue why I was unhappy, and not know what to do. And so in a way it was hard. I got rid of the eating disorder, which was fantastic, but I didn't get rid of, I wasn't able to get rid of me, which was, in my mind, part of the problem, and so I think I got pregnant, I had my son, and when he was born, I ended up actually with so I went off my medication that I had been on while I was pregnant. I went off of it. And that was a choice. Some people stay on. For me, I looked at the evidence, and the evidence for me just wasn't conclusive enough for what it would do to the fetus at that time. This is 16 years ago. And so I just decided to go off. And then when my son was born, I crashed for sure. I went into quite a deep postpartum depression. I did not have the warm and fuzzies for my son at all. I felt very helpless. I felt out of control. I definitely, in my mind, was planning, I don't want to say planning my death, but planning accidents in my mind so that I could get hit by a car, and then I could be in the hospital, and then I could just be away for a little bit and try and find my mind, or I could run away. I think he'd be better off if I just left, all of these thoughts coming to my mind. And I think I had been hopeful that my pregnancy was great off of the medication. And so I thought, awesome, I'm cured, I don't need this. And so for me, it was really struggling again after he was born. Was I didn't want to tell anyone. It was embarrassing. I think my family was so they didn't know whether after my eating disorder, whether I'd even be able to get pregnant. And I got pregnant, and now I have a child. And, I think even myself, I wanted things to be okay for a period of time. I just wanted to be happy, and I wanted to be a normal person. And yet here I was with a child that I felt completely indifferent towards. I was I'd feed him and I'd be like, anybody, you want to hold him? Do you want to? I don't want to hold him. So, and I remember just thinking to myself, well, I've never been a mom, so maybe this is just the way I am a mom. Some women gush and love their babies, and maybe I just, he was a boy too. I'd never had any brothers or anything. I come from a family of all girls, so part of me was like, maybe that's the problem. And then I think after close to 3 months went by, I think my husband was like, you're not yourself, and there's nothing wrong with going in and just talking to somebody about it. Like, let's just go in and say, this is kind of what you've been feeling. And I have to really give him credit in that sense, that he's always been very open, and not like, I don't think he's ever seen it like as stigmatized or like, oh, my wife, for him, it's like, you're you, and this is one of the things that you're struggling with. Let's go get some help, And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
which was, honestly, I'm so thankful for my husband through this whole thing. He did have to learn a lot though. Like, he was, before I'd gone into recovery, he was like full-time student, like just he was working with youth, and, and I was like working 3 jobs and paying all the bills, and, so I was being sort of the hyper responsible one. I was paying for him to go to school, finish his degree in theology, and he was just loving it. And, so he definitely had to sort of, like, his life was incredibly interrupted, obviously, when I first went into recovery. And so I think he was willing to grow with me in this. It wasn't just myself, like, you need to fix you. My husband always saw us as a team, and if something was wrong with me, it obviously affected him. And so he would just say, like, I think, let's go talk to somebody. Or he was always very encouraging. And so with my son, we went in, and I still look back. It just amazes me. My doctor was unavailable the day I went in, or I called in sick. And so her partner had come in, but her partner was my eating disorder doctor.
What?
Yeah. And so I was like, what? Like, because she had referred my eating disorder doctor, I'd gotten pregnant when I was in recovery. And so she referred me. I didn't have a doctor. So she's like, I have a friend. She's awesome. And so I went to her, but apparently they shared an office, and I didn't even know, because I saw her at a clinic somewhere else. And so I go in that day, and it's my eating disorder doctor. I'm like, hi. Which was amazing, because I'd talked to her for 3 years. I mean, she was the one who was like, she was pretty real, when I was going through stuff and dancing around, trying to recover. She was the one who really said, like, you know what, like, pardon my language, but she was like, piss or get off the pot. Like, you got to commit to this, or just stop. And I remember just like, oh my goodness. But it was in love. Like, she was totally tough, but through love. And she knew, the strength of this. So here I am with my new baby, and she talks to me a little bit, and she knows my history. I couldn't fake anything. I couldn't be like, oh, yeah, no, I'm fine. And it's just, she's just like, so, and how about this? And how's this going? And how's your eating? And, and I'm just, on one hand, I was fully exposed, which sucked. But on the other hand, it was like I didn't have to hide anything. And so I could get genuine care from her. And so she basically on the spot just said, most women who have a new baby, one of the first things when they come in the office is they want to show the baby. And she's like, you haven't even showed him to me. And he was right there with me, he was in the bucket seat or whatever, but I had him covered with a blanket, and I hadn't even like to show her. And she's like, that's not normal. Like, she was so like, just looked me straight in the eye and said, that's not normal. And I was like, no, I know, and it was like this honest moment. And so she put me back on medication. I agreed to go back on medication. And it was, for me, I was one of those lucky people where the chemical thing with me was definitely a huge part of what would like set me off. And I would get so low that it just, I couldn't get myself back up. And so she put me back on medication, and about 5 days later, because the kind that I take has no shelf life, so it doesn't build up in your system. It really just works as it is. In the point, if you don't take it too, like at night, like you're in total withdrawal too. Like, it's awful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it went in, and about 5 days later, like, I remember looking at my son and just like being overwhelmed with love. Like, just like, it was like I saw him for the first time ever. And I was just like, this is what I've had. This is what, it was like these shades were like taken off my eyes, and I could see him. And it just, for me, was a really big moment where it was like, yes, Lalainia, and the medication has made this possible. It wasn't like I fought my way through it and I'm going to do this. It was like, no, I had fought and was losing the battle. And it was going back on my medication that helped me regain footing, And so I actually was in that place for quite a while, in a pretty good place, until I got pregnant with my daughter. And I went off my meds again, and I crashed again after she was born. And so they increased my meds that time. And then I was okay for a period of time. And about 5 years ago, I would say, wow, it's almost 6 years ago, about 6 years ago, my medication stopped working. And I just really crashed mood-wise. And I was like, what's going on? I'm on medication. I'm normally fine. And basically what happened, I went into the doctor and they just said, well, I hate this analogy, but it's a really good one. She's like, if you ate chocolate cake every day for the rest of your life, like, for a while, that chocolate cake would be amazing. And then eventually your body just goes, cake, and I was like, okay, great analogy, but that sucks. Like,
yeah. You know what? That's one of my biggest fears, that I'm just going to wake up and then it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, that's not working, right? And so for me, like, that's in a way, now let me tell you the end of the story. In a way, it's a mixture of that. That's not what had happened, but that was part of it,
Yeah.
But I feel my journey was to have the medication stop working, because there was so much internally I hadn't dealt with. And that really was my self-hatred. And I think, you can distract yourself for a really long time with lots of things. And I had done that. And so my medication had balanced my mood, but my psychology, my cognitive, functioning was totally whacked and very negative. And so I think what happened was my medication not working really was my inner life coming to a head and just saying, you can't live like this anymore. Like, I think of my children, and often what I did through these last 5 years, especially when I was really working on it, I would look at my daughter. So I had a son and then I had a daughter, and I would look at my daughter and I would hear something I would say to myself inside my head. And I'd go, what if you just said that to her?
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, what if you just said that to her? Like, oh, you're such an idiot. Like, with such disdain, how would she feel today? And it was just, it became plain to me, like, oh, like, I'm like her. Like, I'm a person. I'm a human being. I'm somebody that was a child at one point. I was a baby and then a child. And, all of these things are affecting me. All of these things that I say are actually dictating my actions and my mood and all of that, And so I went on a very, very difficult journey of uncovering my thoughts and my fears, and in a way, like, becoming I want to be careful how I say this, but in a way becoming accountable to the part that I do have control over. And that is my inner life. Nobody else can change that or can control that except for me. And that's not off of meds. That is on meds. I need to go off of my meds. You know, I think my meds give me the level ground that I need, or that I needed to start fighting this. I don't want to say fighting too, because it actually ended up being not a battle, but it's going to sound so hokey, but like a love affair, you know, it ended up becoming something that I had to learn to love, and to see that God, that God loves me no matter what. And it doesn't matter if I'm waking up in the morning and I have a cold, or I don't feel like being a mom that day, or, you know, I'm feeling negative about something I did in my job. You know, it doesn't matter, because I'm somebody's child. You know, I was created to be loved, and I was created to stay connected to that love and that acceptance. And that is the only way that I can walk through life and not be just pulled down, you know, to the ground. And so for me, that was my journey the last 5 years, was just walking through a lot of pain, a lot of anger. I want to say this because I know there's people out there struggling with this. A lot of anger towards God. Mine was not, oh, just give it all over to God and everything's going to be okay. I actually lost my faith for a period of about 1.5 years. So I would have called myself an atheist actually for about 1.5 years, which was hard because my husband is a pastor. And it was through that journey, only through that journey of kind of losing everything. I said to you earlier, you know, this onion thing, you know, we're all like onions, and you peel off this outer layer and you think, oh yes, you know, but the fact is there's just another, there's another layer there, you know, and yeah, we sort of get deeper and we get closer to the core, but the fact is that, you know, there's still several layers. I feel like every morning I wake up, you know, I start trying to pull back that layer that I just already peeled off. You know, it's like, yeah, but just come back because this is too much. You know?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, it's like, come, just cut. And it's like, but once you sort of live in a certain truth, you're like, no, you can't. Like, you can't go backwards. And so for me, I just like being really real about that part of my journey, because it was ugly. Like, it was really like, there's times where I was on my knees screaming at the top of my lungs. Don't worry, nobody was home. I wasn't doing it in front of people. But just, yeah, like I was so angry and so mad at God for the journey that I was being put on. And, you know, like for my depression and even for my lack of faith, like I got to the bottom, like, God, it says, you know, you're the one who gives faith. So then why do I have no faith? You know, and then walking through it, having no faith was so strange too, because I realized it was all I had ever really lived for. It had sort of been the foundation of what I lived for. And sort of to pull that away, as, you know, awful as it was, in a way, I think that's what it took to bring me full circle to the idea that I have value, because I understood that God had value. I understood that God was in charge, that God was big, and that God was great. But I could not fathom that I had any part or any place with him in that plan, or within even just this world, you know. And so being without God for a period of time helped me get in touch, I think, with just the worth of being human, even not in light of God. And so then once I came back full circle and my faith started to come back, I realized, oh, that beauty, that weight, that the humanity that we all have, that we all start with, has been given from God. Like that is a gift. But I think it took sort of losing my faith, and I spent a lot of time with people outside the church, like in secular environments, and people who are really real and really open. And I had to confront not only like my sadness, but like my ugliness too, like my real, like, negative ego side of like, oh, the thoughts that run through my head. Like, it's like, and I remember my therapist at the time, like, he's like, good. I want you to live in, I want you to focus on all of those, like, just that side of you for 2 weeks. And I'm like, but he's like, I don't want you to fight it. I just want, just go there, and I'm like, because I was someone like, I didn't swear. I didn't do anything that was, because God's watching, and he could, he could hit me with a lightning bolt. So for me, it was like, well, I want to, but I'm not going to. And so I remember just kind of diving into that negativity, and really what it was mostly in my car. I wanted to do it when I was by myself. Yes. Yeah, lots came out, and he encouraged me to, anything that would come to my mind, just to speak out loud. And honestly, the awfulness that poured out of my own mouth, and not just about myself. And I think I'm always really hard on myself, and I'm so gentle and loving with other people. And yet he was telling me that's impossible. Like, the standards you hold for yourself are the standards you hold for others. I'm like, no, that's not true. Yes. But what's interesting, when you get down to it, the fact is that a standard is a standard. You can't separate yourself from other people, because you're saying, this is the way I think I should live. Yeah, you can't control other people, but you would much prefer them to be living in the same way that you think that they should live. Yes. Yeah, and so hearing like my judgments on other people, and it was mind-blowing. And the first week I was way more depressed than I had ever been, in the sense that I was like, I'm a way worse person. I'm like, why did you do this to me? Like, I'm so much worse than I even thought I was. But what he was doing me was just taking me on a journey of being real, and not trying to shove that part of who I am away, but bring it close and go, it's a part of you. You got to own it. The further you push it away, the more you're going to lose yourself, the more you're going to feel like you're out of control. And so what was weird was the second week, what happened was, it was like, I started seeing everybody, like, I'd say something angry, and then I'd see something, I'm like, yeah, you too, right? You're mad too, and it became like almost a camaraderie. It was like, I started seeing the world like, we're all ticked, and we're all frustrated, and we're all angry about it, and instead of that isolating me, because I wanted to push that feeling so far away, because it wasn't holy, it wasn't kind, it wasn't good, I kind of embraced it, and it gave me a feeling of camaraderie with the world, and a connection, I think, that I had never had. I'd always been here, and people were there, and that was our job, to serve them, and to, and just go, no, I'm one of them, like, I'm one of them. I'm broken. I can be a jerk. I can, swear sometimes. There was some expletives flying sometimes in my car, which for me was scary. Really? Like I said, I had the judgment thing in my head, and yet, you know what? Like, it was just in my car by myself. I still had boundaries, I wasn't going all over the place, and but really learning that was inside of me was very scary. But learning to accept that was inside of me was, I think, what has brought me the most healing in my life. And yeah, so I'm still on my meds, and my meds keep me steady, I think, but I had to do that hard work to, I think just like I said, I want to be careful with how I say this, but there is stuff that we can do as well that helps us, that creates health in our life. And I think I had given up a little bit. I think because depression, and whether it's depression, bipolar 2, schizophrenia, like it's all overwhelming. It's all just so overwhelming, and you don't feel like you have any control over it, And so I think I had given up and gone, in a way, I'm a victim. Like, I have an illness, and I'm going to struggle for the rest of my life. But the therapist that I found, he was just, he's like, he had a motto of 100% responsibility, but 0 guilt. So his big thing was, you can take responsibility for your life, but don't carry any guilt over it. Because the fact is that we're all learning, and so that's what I had to learn, was the 0 guilt. What's that? Like, that's how I ran my life, was guilt.
Right.
So for me, the 0 guilt was like, oh, there is something I can do. But if I suck at it and I screw it up, it's okay, 0 guilt, like moving on. So, yeah.
And don't you find, it's really interesting what you're saying there. Don't you find that those things are the hardest things to do? Like, I joke with you before, I've joked about how, like, the ugly, letting that out a little bit is very healing. Speaking those words out takes the power away from it, I find. And I always joke, like, oh, when someone tells me to breathe or journal or eat healthy or do those things, like, I want to neck punch them, because I feel like, don't you see, I want to do those things, but those little things are the hardest. Like, it feels like a mountain. Like, when I am in like a hypomanic state, to be like, sit down and breathe, or when I can do yoga in a different state.
Sit down and breathe.
It's like the whole time I'm like, get me out of here. Like, no, I don't have an intention. My intention is to get away from you. Like, and
or like exercise, you just need to get outside and go for a walk. Don't you think I would do that if I could?
Yeah. And I think that's why, I think it's so important what you're talking about, is doing the work. And I understand why you're trying to be careful, because it's hard to, you don't want to put the onus on someone, because it's like they can't do it. And I remember a therapist telling me, set yourself up for success. Like, if you walk to the end of the drive, like, make that your goal. Because I'm like eye in the sky, and I feel like we're the same, in that we're creative and dreamers, and we think big. Like, big is what we do. The little is
lower the bar,
right? It's
lower that bar.
Yeah, right. And then I just think that that's really important. I think that that, like you said, the medication brings you here.
Yeah.
So you can do the other stuff. And I think sometimes what's happened to me is I've sat in the here, because it's so much better than here. But then I stopped doing the work. Like, I had a really hard, and I'm kind of coming out of it right now, kind of like an episode, a hypomanic episode. And I still kind of am, so angry, because I'm like, I've been here. Like, I know this. Like, how could I be back here again? Like, what is going on? Like, because I forget that it's an illness. I forget that I was just here.
Yeah.
It's always good enough. I have to do some work. And I was like, they always discharge me. And it sounds so lovely to be called high functioning, but it's actually really crappy, because no one takes you seriously, or you keep getting discharged. And because you can look like on the outside,
can I just be considered sick for a little while?
Well, yeah. And it's like, but then you don't. Like, that's the opposite of what I want. But then maybe people would really understand. And I think, I think I was joking, like, they need to stop. Like, I need a tune-up. I need to go back, because I think that I was starting to think, because I'm doing well, and I'm finding so much healing and advocacy. And the more I talk about it, as much as it freaks me out on the interwebs, right? Yeah. Google Shaylee, oh yay!
I have an eating disorder.
Yeah, right?
Right? It's like stigma.
Yeah, stigmatizing myself.
I would say for whatever reason, either I'm just like totally out of it or God made me this way, because it's like, I just don't care.
Yeah.
I really don't. I'm like, you know what? Like, so what? You don't know what it's like to be me. This is what it's like to be me. It's like, tell your story, because the fact is that the more you tell it, it's like, honestly, it's like the Me Too movement. Like mental health needs like a Me Too movement, you know, within it, because the fact is that, I mean, we were able to talk. We always talked, and we were always honest about what was going on. But some of the stuff we said probably would have really freaked people out. And that, you know, for me, like, I remember like saying things and people just kind of like, you know, but then somebody else, you know, I remember talking about being on medication at our church. And honestly, thank God we had a staff that acknowledged that it was an important topic to discuss. And I remember like 5 or 6 people coming up to me after the service and like whispering in my ear, I'm on medication too.
Right.
You know, and I'm like, good. You know, I'm like, don't whisper it. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Show you that.
I want to skip to another video, because this is exactly what I want to talk about. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Like, let's wrap this one up, and then let's talk about that in the next one. Okay. So you need to stay tuned for this one, you guys, because this is the thing that I'm absolutely most passionate about, and I'm pretty feeling like my friend here is too. So click through and we'll talk about that.